My husband said he could barely stand me, so I vanished. What happened next changed everything. I used to believe love could survive anything: distance, hardship, time. If you were patient, if you gave enough of yourself, it would hold. For the past 8 years, I lived by that belief. I gave myself fully to my marriage, convinced that slow and steady was the kind of love that lasted. My husband, Nathan, had once been the center of my world. He had this quiet confidence, eyes the color of the sea after a storm, and a laugh that softened even the hardest days. He wasn't flashy, but he was constant, and for a long time, that was more than enough for me. I believed we were a team, a pair built to weather life's chaos together. And then, on a completely ordinary Thursday night, everything I believed about us unraveled in the span of seconds. I had come home from work late teaching. A night class at the community college had run over, and the house was dimly lit. The soft scent of bergamot and sandalwood hung in the air, the signature of the candles Nathan liked to light after a long day. I slipped off my flats and was just about to call out to him when I heard his voice from the back porch. At first, I thought he was on the phone with his brother. He had that relaxed, offhand tone he used when he wasn't filtering. But then I heard my name. Just doesn't get it anymore, he said. She's exhausting to be around, always waiting for something deeper that isn't there. I can't stand it. I froze. My hand hovered over the light switch, suddenly unsure of whether I wanted to be seen. My chest tightened. I told myself I must have misheard, but then the next words landed like a punch to the gut. I haven't loved her in a long time. She's comfortable, predictable, but that's not what I want anymore. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I felt like I had slipped into someone else's life. The man I had built my life around. The man I had defended, supported, and waited for. He saw me as an obligation, as someone he tolerated, not loved. I didn't confront him. I didn't storm out onto the porch and demand answers. I stayed rooted to the hallway wall, heart shattering in silence. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough to feel everything collapse. Long enough to know things would never be the same. That night, while he slept soundly upstairs, I packed a small bag. No dramatic goodbye. No confrontation. I left a single note on the kitchen counter. You don't have to pretend anymore. And I disappeared. I drove through the night until the sun started to rise behind the mountains. I ended up in a little roadside diner, hours from home, running on caffeine and adrenaline. A waitress poured me coffee and asked if I wanted waffles or eggs. I told her waffles. It was the first decision I'd made just for myself in years. I sat there, staring out the window at my reflection in the glass, trying to recognize the woman I had become. Tired eyes, wrinkled clothes, a silence I didn't know how to fill. When the door chimed behind me, I didn't turn around. Not until I heard a voice I recognized. Nathan's been calling everyone. He's losing it. Came the voice. It was my sister Emily, somehow having tracked me down. She looked at me with a strange mixture of sympathy and frustration. He says he didn't mean it, that he was just venting. Venting? I laughed without humor. Since when does venting sound like a confession? She sat across from me waiting. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. I didn't know. I really didn't. I had spent so long being half of something that I didn't know how to be whole on my own. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going back to a house where I was just comfortable, where I was tolerated instead of loved. The next few days were a blur. I turned off my phone. I stayed in a cheap motel. I walked on familiar streets and let myself feel all of it: the anger, the grief, the strange freedom. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my college friend, Ray, who lived in another state. She had always said I could crash on her couch if I ever needed an escape. She didn't ask questions when I showed up at her door. Over the next weeks, I started piecing myself back together. Not for Nathan, not for anyone else. For me. Nathan tried to reach out, apologized, claimed it wasn't what he meant. But I had heard the truth in his voice that night, and I couldn't hear it. He didn't love me. And maybe I realized I didn't love him anymore either. Not really. I loved the idea of us, the history, the routine, but that wasn't enough. Months passed. I got a part-time job at a bookstore, took long walks, learned how to cook for one, and for the first time in nearly a decade, I started to feel alive again, not just surviving, but actually living. Do I regret walking away? No. I regret not hearing the truth sooner. I regret how long I held on, hoping for something that was already gone. But leaving? That was the bravest thing I've ever done. And what happened next didn't just shock me. It saved me. I never thought I'd actually do it. Not really. But that night, after hearing the man I loved speak like I was a stranger, a mistake, I turned away from the back door, walked quietly to the bedroom, and pulled a worn overnight bag from under the bed. My hands trembled as I shoved in clothes. Jeans, sweaters, underwear. Enough for a few days. Maybe a week. The house smelled like bergamot and sandalwood, his favorite combination. I used to find comfort in it. Now it clung to me like smoke after a fire. As I zipped the bag, my eyes landed on the photo by our nightstand. Our wedding day. Nathan's arm around me, both of us beaming, our cheeks pink from the wind and champagne. I used to look at that photo whenever things got hard, like a promise that whatever we faced, we'd face together. But now it just felt like a joke I hadn't been letting on. Down the hall, I heard him laugh, a low, relaxed sound from the porch. Still on the phone with whoever he'd been talking to, whoever he could talk to about how little I meant to him, about how he hadn't loved me in years, that he didn't want predictable, that I was comfortable, but not what he wanted anymore. I paused at the kitchen doorway, clutching the strap of my bag, heart thudding in my chest like it wanted to break through and run without me. I thought about stepping out there, making him see me see what he'd said and what it had done. But what was the point? He'd already erased me with his words. I wasn't a partner anymore. I was a placeholder. So instead, I grabbed a pen and scribbled 3 lines on a torn grocery list from the counter. I heard everything. I hope you get whatever it is you're missing. Don't look for me. Then I left the note on the table, opened the front door, and slipped out into the night. The air was sharp and wet with the beginning of a storm. I didn't feel it. My car was cold inside, but familiar. I started it, hands shaking as they clutched the steering wheel like it might tether me to something solid. My breath fogged the windshield. My heartbeat was a dull roar in my ears. His words echoed, cruel and clear. I haven't loved her in a long time. I just don't know how to leave. So I did it for him. I didn't know where I was going yet. But for the first time in a long time, I knew one thing for sure. I was done being someone's second thought. I should have been angry, furious even. But all I felt was a bottomless hollowness, like something had caved in at the center of me. 8 years of marriage, and suddenly it meant nothing. I had poured my love, my trust, my future into a man who now described me as comfortable, like I was an old sweater he didn't have the heart to throw away. I never saw it coming. Nathan and I had always seemed like a solid team, at least from the outside. Sure, we had our routines, dinners in front of the TV, quiet mornings with coffee, small kisses goodbye. I thought those quiet patterns meant we were content, safe. But last night, everything changed. I'd just gotten home from teaching a late community college writing class. The air outside was crisp, the kind that makes your lungs ache just a little. I unlocked the front door quietly so I wouldn't wake him. But when I stepped inside, the house was already awake, soft light spilling from the kitchen, the smell of bergamot and sandalwood candles Nathan always liked. Then I heard his voice, low but clear, drifting in through the slightly open back door. He was on the phone, with someone I didn't recognize. Jess just doesn't get it anymore, he said, chuckling under his breath. She's comfortable, predictable, but that's not what I want anymore. I stood there frozen, every muscle in my body locked. I haven't loved her in a long time, he continued. I just don't know how to leave. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. That sentence sliced through me with a clean finality. My husband, who kissed my forehead every morning, who once wrote me poems, was telling someone he hadn't loved me in years. I didn't wait to hear more. Instead, I went straight to the bedroom, grabbed a small duffel I usually packed for weekend conferences, and started tossing clothes in. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to go. I left a note on the kitchen counter. I heard what you said. Don't call me tonight. I need space. I slipped out the front door unnoticed. The roads were nearly empty, bathed in the orange glow of late-night streetlights. I couldn't go to France. Too many mutual connections. Too many questions I wasn't ready to answer. My sister Emily lived 2 hours away, and I didn't feel safe crying on the highway. So I drove to the only place that made sense at the time, the overlook by the lake, where Nathan and I used to go when we were first dating. I parked, killed the engine, and just sat there with my hands gripping the steering wheel like I was still trying to hold everything together. The water was calm, almost glassy, a sharp contrast to the storm breaking inside my chest. I thought about the little signs I had ignored, the way Nathan had started sleeping with his back to me, how he brushed off my stories from work, the private smiles he gave his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. Had he already moved on emotionally? Had he been waiting for me to leave so he wouldn't have to? Tears came finally, slow and quiet, not angry, just heavy. Then my phone buzzed. Nathan. I stared at the screen, not sure what I wanted. Part of me needed to hear his voice say it again to confirm it hadn't been some twisted dream. Another part wanted to throw the phone into the lake, but I answered, Jess? His voice was cautious, like he wasn't sure which version of me would pick up. Where are you? I said nothing. He hesitated. Look, I don't know what's going on, but I heard you. I interrupted. My voice surprised me. It was calm, steady, silence. I heard every word you said, Nathan. More silence. Then, Jess, I didn't mean. Don't lie to me. He inhaled sharply. Just tell me one thing, I said. Were you ever going to say it to my face? Nothing. Just breath. Then, where are you? I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the car, watching the moon drift across the lake. My body was rigid, my heart tired. But for the first time in years, I wasn't holding myself together for someone else. By morning, I had a plan. I texted my old college roommate Ray, who lived 3 towns over. She'd always said I could crash at her place if I ever needed an escape. I told her I'd be there by noon. When I checked my phone again, Nathan had sent 6 messages. Jess, please come home. We need to talk. This is a misunderstanding. You're being dramatic. Let's be adults about this. I didn't mean it like that. That last one stung more than the rest. Dramatic. It wasn't drama. It was clarity. And I wasn't going to shrink myself to fit into someone's fading affection ever again. So I started the car, and I didn't look back. I drove without a destination, just mile after mile of open road, the hum of the engine filling the silence where Nathan's voice used to be. The world blurred past small towns, highways, trees bending in the wind. I wasn't running away, but I wasn't ready to stop either. The weight of everything settled deeper into my chest the farther I went. It wasn't just the heartbreak. It was the years of blindness convincing myself that love was enough. That effort and devotion could make up for the absence of passion, for the lack of truth. I had lived in a fantasy, and now that it had crumbled, I didn't know who I was outside of it. Somewhere along the drive, I pulled into a gas station on the edge of a small town. The kind of place that felt stuck in time, an old faded sign hanging over the pumps, a single rusted vending machine buzzing near the entrance. I stepped out of the car, stretching my stiff limbs. The cool air stung against my tired skin. Inside, the clerk barely glanced up as I grabbed a bottle of water and a protein bar. But as I walked toward the counter, someone else caught my eye. A man stood near the back, flipping through a magazine, older, maybe in his late 50s, with weathered hands and a thoughtful frown. Something about him seemed familiar, though I couldn't place it. Then, as if sensing my gaze, he looked up. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, I saw a flicker of recognition. He nodded, like he knew exactly what I was going through. You look like you've been driving a long time, he said, his voice rough with age. I hesitated before nodding. Yeah. Trying to outrun something. A dry laugh escaped me, more like trying to figure out where I'm supposed to be. He set the magazine down and leaned on the counter. That's the thing about leaving, he said. You don't always know where you're going, but sometimes that's the best part. His words settled over me, heavier than I expected. I paid for my things and stepped back outside, the man's voice still echoing in my head. I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd been so focused on what I'd lost that I hadn't even considered what I might gain. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the road ahead. For the first time in years, I didn't have to answer to anyone. I didn't have to be the woman who came home on time, who made sure dinner was ready, who asked if Nathan needed anything before thinking about myself. For the first time in years, I was free. The thought scared me, but it also felt good. I pulled out my phone, scrolling past Nathan's unread messages instead. I opened my contacts and hovered over a name I hadn't thought about in too long. Emily, my sister. We hadn't spoken much in the past few years. Life got messy between work, marriage, and distance. But if there was anyone who'd understand, it was her. I took a deep breath and hit call. It rang twice before she picked up. Jess? Her voice was soft, like I'd caught her off guard. It's been a while, I said, swallowing hard. She didn't say anything at first, just waited. Finally, I exhaled. No, I'm not okay, but I think I'm ready to figure out what okay even looks like. Emily didn't ask too many questions. She just listened. I didn't spill everything all at once. I wasn't ready for that. But I told her enough for her to say, you know, you don't have to do this alone. For the first time in days, I let out a real breath. She invited me to stay with her for a while. No pressure, no expectations. Just a place to land while I sorted through the wreckage of my old life. And for the first time since I walked out of that house, I said yes to something that wasn't tied to Nathan. The drive to Emily's place took a few hours. The whole way, I kept expecting my phone to ring again. Another desperate attempt from Nathan to pull me back. But it never did. Maybe he finally understood I wasn't coming home. By the time I pulled into Emily's driveway, the sun was dipping low behind the trees. She was waiting outside, arms crossed, leaning against her truck like she'd been there a while. When I stepped out of the car, she didn't say much, just looked me over, taking in the exhaustion I couldn't hide. Then she nodded. Good to see you. Something inside me loosened at those words. She didn't ask if I was okay, didn't expect me to pretend I was. She just knew. She handed me a beer, and we sat out on the porch in comfortable silence. The cicadas hummed in the distance. The air was warm but gentle. It had been a long time since I'd felt this kind of peace. No tension, no pressure to fix something, no weight of someone else's expectations pressing down. Do you regret it? Emily asked eventually. I took a slow sip of my drink, thinking, did I regret walking away from the life I'd built? From the man I once loved? No, I said finally. I regret not seeing it sooner. But leaving? No, I think this is the first thing I've done for myself in a long time. Emily nodded like she understood. Good. And for the first time, I believed it. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what came next. But for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a trap. It felt like an open road, stretching wide ahead of me, and I was finally ready to see where it led.